Ladies and gentlemen, please stand for the presentation of colors, followed by the National Anthem.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner
Please be seated. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the White House East Room in all its stunning glory at the Richard Nixon Presidential Library and Museum. I am Chris Nordyke, Director of Events with the Richard Nixon Foundation, and we are grateful to have you and your participation in today's solemn ceremony. As we gather to remember those patriots we lost 16 years ago today, please join me in again thanking the Orange County Fire Authority Pipes and Drums and Honor Guard, the Blue Eagles Color Guard, and this magnificent near 200-member choir and band, with members from Villa Park High School, Orange High School, and the Orange Community Master Chorale for that spectacular opening. Terrific job, guys. Thank you. Please also join me in welcoming a few special guests. We have former ambassadors to Spain under George W. Bush and former chairman of the board of the Nixon Foundation, Ambassador George Argyros. George was the inaugural recipient of our Champion of the American Dream back in May. Thank you for coming, sir. Longtime family friend and friend of the Nixon Foundation, Ruth Shannon. From the Yorba Linda City Council, we have Mayor Peggy Huang, Councilman Tom Lindsay, and Mayor Pro Tem Jean Hernandez. Representing Congressman Ed Royce, his district representative, Allison Martin, our good friend. And of course, all of the men and women from the Orange County Sheriff's Department and the Orange County Fire Authority, thank you all for your unending support. Today is a National Day of Remembrance, wherein we pay tribute to the 2,977 brave souls who perished 16 years ago on one of our country's darkest days. But on this day, let us also remember the strength of resolve and the abundance of patriotism that we saw across the United States. President George W. Bush said that terrorist attacks can shake the foundations of our biggest buildings, but they cannot touch the foundation of America. These acts shatter steel, but they cannot dent the steel of American resolve. Those who lost their lives are gone, but they're not forgotten. Please join me in a moment of silence in their honor. Thank you. This is also the proper moment to recognize the heroes of September 11th, the heroes that continue to protect our safety and our essential freedoms, many of whom join us this morning. They are the police officers who put themselves in harm's way, protecting us where we walk, work, and live. They are the firefighters who act as first responders, sacrificing everything in the face of great danger for the basic survival of their fellow citizens. They are the troops who risk everything on the front lines and at installations worldwide to prevent terror from coming ashore. And they are the families who sacrificed for loved one service to our country. We will hear from a few of these heroes in a moment. But first, I ask the service members, police, firefighters, and first responders in the room, and the families of these brave men and women to stand and be recognized. We thank you for what you do each and every day. You are the backbone of what makes America the greatest nation on earth. Delivering today's invocation will be Chaplain Terry Gordon. Terry joined the U.S. Navy Chaplains Corps in 1992 with his first assignment, sending him to Operation Restoring Hope in Somalia. After a distinguished career at posts across the world, He made his way to Navy Region Southwest in San Diego, where he continues to serve the Word of God. His personal decorations include the Legion of Merit, the Meritorious Service Medal, and the Naval Commendation Medal, the Naval Achievement Medal, and the Combat Action Ribbon. Chaplain Gordon, it's a pleasure to have you.
Wow. It's an honor to be here this morning. Being a child of the 60s, I have fond memories of a childhood program. The late Reverend Fred Rogers, the creator of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, some of the old folks in the room would know what that's all about, gave this famous quote from his mother regarding tragedy. He said that in tragic events, to always look for the helpers. You will always find people who are helping. And if you look for the helpers, you'll know there is hope. As we start this 9/11 observance, I would like each of you to join me in a brief silent prayer for those facing tragedy in our world today. From those lives changed by storms in Texas and Florida, to those affected by wildfires in California and the Pacific Northwest. Will you please join me in a silent prayer for all struggling today, wherever they are, and for those helpers who are diligently working to bring hope. Let us pray. Heavenly Father, we gather today before you to remember not the horrible acts brought upon innocent lives by a handful of evil humanity, but of the people whose lives were forever changed. For those working at their job in the Twin Towers, those standing watches in the Pentagon, to the crews and passengers on airlines that would never make it home. We acknowledge the senseless horror of it all, and we are left speechless to explain it. Yet even in the moments of the unexplainable, of the inexcusable, we are in awe of our heroes. To those first responders, heavy-laden firefighters who climbed countless stories to fight fires, and to those police officers who directed so many people out of buildings to safety. So many public servants who gave of their own lives that others might live. We remember also those soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines who even now are on the front lines around our world, protecting all those that would do us harm and who would take away our liberties. These public servants, these warriors, are the ones we celebrate today. We honor their lives of sacrifice and pray your grace and protection over them all. Finally, may all who suffered personally the tragedy of 9/11 know your comfort, your peace that surpasses all understanding, and the love and respect of a grateful nation. We remember them all this day. For it's in your holy name that I pray. Amen.
For
There's plenty more of that to come. Our first speaker is the acting chief of the Orange County Fire Authority. Chief Dave Anderson has been involved in the fire service for nearly 3 decades. He began his career in the city of San Clemente, a place that President Nixon knew very well. As a reserve firefighter, he became a full-time firefighter in 1991. Chief Anderson has been named Orange County Fire Authority Firefighter of the Year, served as planning team manager for the Hurricane Katrina response in 2005, served on the CAL FIRE Incident Management Team number 10, and acted as chair on the FireScope Emerging Information Technology Committee. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Chief Dave Anderson.
Thank you for that introduction. I'm truly humbled to be here today and to be invited to speak for just a few brief moments. To see the outpouring and the community presence here is just overwhelming, and it gives us great comfort. Today we reflect on the events of 9/11, a day of loss, a day of survival, a day of bravery of first responders and members of our armed forces. To have New York Police Sergeant John Curtis in our presence today is beyond words. Sergeant Curtis, you have our enduring respect. Thank you. This anniversary remains difficult for many, but the community's presence here today reminds us of the love and faithfulness in your hearts and of our nation. We will never forget the nearly 3,000 lives that were taken from us. Innocent men, women, and children whose lives were cut short in a cruel act that defies explanation. In total, 411 emergency workers paid the ultimate sacrifice. These brave men and women awoke on this fateful morning, kissed their loved ones goodbye, and never returned home. We remember the courage, the bravery, the strength of responders who rushed into harm's way to help others they never ever knew. Each took an oath to serve and protect. They responded when called upon and moved towards the danger. We have since learned the countless stories of selflessness, love, compassion, and service. Today, we publicly express our gratitude and remember their courageous efforts. In the aftermath of 9/11, I'm reminded how this terrible day was a turning point for our entire country. We vowed to never forget. We treated each other differently. We remained sensitive to one another's needs. We freely offered care and compassion. We came together. We depended upon each other. We were unified. We were a part of a larger community, a community that cared. On the 16th anniversary, our memories may be susceptible to fading, and we may be tempted to return to our old ways. I challenge all to renew their commitments to the larger community. Take great care for one another. Remain focused on what truly matters. Be kind and inclusive. Remember how much we are all the same and how much we all need each other. May God bless the memory of those lost. May they forever remain in our hearts. And may God have his hand on our community and our country. Thank you.
You guys are getting better and better, Chuck and Mike. Thank you. Our next speaker, too, is no stranger to his profession. Sheriff Don Barnes is the Orange County Sheriff's Department's Chief Operating Officer, overseeing the daily operations of the department's 3,900 employees and 700 volunteers. His nearly 30-year career in public service includes posts as Commander of Field Operations and Investigative Services Command, overseeing all patrol operations as well as airport operations, Homeland Security, and investigations divisions for the Sheriff's Department. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Under Sheriff Don Barnes.
Thank you to the Nixon Library for continuing to host this event each year. It is a tremendous tribute to the victims of 9/11 and an important opportunity for all of us to rededicate ourselves to ensuring those lives are not forgotten. 16 Septembers have passed since that horrible day, but for most of us, those moments are still very vivid. The destruction of the buildings, the desperation on the faces, the grieving loved ones, and the heroism of first responders and civilians alike. As we pause today to remember the individuals who died on 9/11, I think it is also important to talk about their legacy and how we have honored their memory. I want to speak to you about the legacy from a law enforcement perspective, and then close with the challenge for all of us to meet. First responders have honored the 9/11 victims' memory through action. Both law enforcement and fire have worked to implement strategies that will address threats, prevent attacks, and improve our emergency response. These strategies, unfortunately, are based on lessons learned from 9/11. For example, in Orange County, we have a terrorism fusion center that includes the Sheriff's Department, municipal law enforcement, city and county fire, and the FBI. The center works around the clock identifying, analyzing, and acting on threats in Orange County. This was created after 9/11 and has been instrumental in preventing attacks against us here. This center and other operations represent a paradigm shift in public safety. No longer do we operate in silos where information and resources are not shared. Today, we collaborate with one another, share information, and perform coordinated operations that result in a safer Orange County for all our residents. Each victim of 9/11 has their own legacy and has left their own fingerprint on the world. But a collective legacy of the victims is that our communities are now prepared to prevent and respond to attacks. Now the challenge, one I think we must all work to meet. After 9/11, our nation came together. We mourned together, we prayed together, we volunteered together, we donated together, and we were resolved together to respond to the most devastating of attacks on our soil. We were truly one America. In recent years, we have seen great division. Yet once again, as unprecedented tragedy has struck our nation through Hurricanes Harvey and Irma, we come together again as Americans to respond. Our shared American kinship is never stronger than in times of great distress. I would challenge all of us to keep this spirit of unity alive even when we're not facing tragedy. Upon being elected to the presidency in 1968, the namesake of this library said that the great objective of his administration would be to bring us together. Now, in 2017, this is something that all Americans must strive for to meet the challenge of coming together. We will always have political disagreements, disputes, and differences that at times seem insurmountable to overcome. This is part of a democracy. But our rhetoric should not result in hatred of one another. In his inaugural address, President Nixon reminded us that we cannot learn from one another until we stop shouting at one another, until we speak quietly enough so that our words can be heard as well as our voices. Those who attacked us on 9/11 did not much care about how the people in the Twin Towers voted, or the skin color of those aboard the aircraft, or the individual personalities of those working in the Pentagon. The 3,000 were killed simply because they were Americans. People that were marked as Americans because they lived in a society, people marked as Americans because they lived in a society that, since its founding, has held strong to the principles of individual freedom, the rule of law, and certain inalienable rights. Let's keep those values in mind when disagreements arise. We may continue to disagree, but we must remember our community, our commonality, too. We all face the same enemy, and we respect the same set of shared values and must represent those to the rest of the world. Let's choose to honor the victims of 9/11 by standing together, shoulder to shoulder, in defense of those noble principles that have marked us as Americans for over 200 years. Let's honor their memory by showing our way of life cannot be destroyed, and that the ideology of the 9/11 attackers will not ever endure. That would be a very American thing to do. Thank you very much.
see how far I had to bring it down after? I'm not short. Chaplain Gordon, Chief Anderson, Sheriff Barnes, thank you for the very moving words and prayer. We have enjoyed a tremendous relationship between our organizations for years and plan to continue to do so in the future. You're always welcome here. To Mike Short and the choirs, and to Chuck J and the ensemble, you have mine and the Nixon Foundation's deep appreciation. Your annual participation in this program is next to none. This program could not happen without you all, so thank you very much for coming out and participating. When I asked for a biography on our final speaker for me to read at this introduction, he simply replied, "Just call me retired New York Police Department Sergeant John Curtis." And I thought to myself, gosh, what a humble man. But his story is anything but humble. It's a tale of heroism. His tale of heroism is the meaning of America, the meaning of bravery, overcoming fear and heartache, and true patriotism. Sergeant Curtis probably thought that September 11th, 2001 was just another day on the job with the New York City Police Force. But we all know, of course, what happened. At 8:46 a.m., American Airlines Flight 11 hit the World Trade Center, and John and his fellow officers took immediate action. When he arrived at the smoking North Tower, Curtis became aware that the office which his wife worked was completely destroyed. Despite knowing that he very well may have lost the love of his life, Sergeant Curtis remained undeterred, and the rescue efforts went on. I know you'll be affected by his harrowing story. Ladies and gentlemen, New York Police Department Sergeant John Curtis.
Please. First, good morning. I would like to thank Chris Nordic and his colleagues here at the Richard Nixon Presidential Library and Museum for the honor and the privilege of being here. Your invitation has been humbling to me. When Chris and I spoke on the phone, I let him know of some of the experiences I had that morning. And he simply told me to tell my story. But as I started to write this, I realized my story is no different than the countless other first responders that were there that day. Do I start by telling you about arriving at work and being mobilized to the Trade Center to meet Captain Wolkowski at the 1st Precinct, and then making our way down to the Trade Center? Or does it start with watching the North Tower fall as we were coming down West Street, seeing it strike One World Financial Plaza, which my wife worked in? I could tell you of the evacuation of One World Financial and the surrounding buildings. I could tell you of setting up a temporary headquarters and a temporary morgue in the lobby of One World Financial. I could continue by telling you of the 5 hours in that morgue and the recovery, searching, and identifying of 37 victims and the bodies of 15 New York City firemen. Or that for 7 heart-wrenching hours, I had no idea where she was. And I had no idea if I was standing on rubble that now contained my wife. I could tell you of the 12 hours at the site with Captain Kloskowski and how he relieved me with newly arriving sergeants at 9 o'clock that night and took myself and my 4 detectives, Alan Dowd, Patrick Connolly, Richie Coyne, and Mark Alsamo, across the street to the Intercontinental Hotel, where we went up to the 2nd floor and the captain went behind the bar, poured us all a shot as we looked out on what became to be known as Ground Zero. And we just looked. And I'm not embarrassed to tell you, we cried. You had 5, 6 grown men sitting there alone, looking at the destruction, and we cried. If the 30 minutes he gave us a choice, we could return to our commands or we could continue on with him. We chose to stay that night, and we chose to stay many days after that. I could tell you of spending the next few months either at the Trade Center site or in the Staten Island landfill where a lot of debris was gone through to look for remains. I could tell you of my downtime at Ground Zero that I would spend in Trinity Church. And when we found out a month later that we were having a child, there was no doubt that her name would be Trinity. But as I said, my story is no different from the countless other first responders because it is what we were trained as police officers and firemen to do. We go. But my story can't be told without telling the story of the many faceless and nameless New Yorkers who on that day risked their lives for strangers, risked their lives to help somebody that they would never see again. People that left for work that day, not knowing that they would make a difference in a middle-aged woman's life who was standing frantically on the street, disoriented and in shock, and how she was comforted and helped away from the turmoil to safety by a nameless stranger who would then make her way to Beekman Downtown Hospital to help in the emergency room in any way that was needed. Or how that after she worked at the hospital, when they realized that there were no people that were going to show up, that there were not going to be any survivors, made her way across the Brooklyn Bridge, helping pedestrians covered in soot and covered in ash herself. Because as I told you earlier, I had no idea where my wife was for 7 hours. And I look at her now and I say to you in a public place for the first time, she is the nameless, faceless New Yorker I am talking about. As I was at the towers, she was helping people away from the towers. I have been called many things. I've been called a hero. I've been called a great man. I've been called a lot of things for what I did that morning and afterwards. But I look at you today. You were my hero. You helped me through the darkest days of the recovery. You helped me at the funerals of my friends. And I thank you and will forever proud to call you my friend, my partner, and my wife. Finally, I say to my daughters, Trinity, it was a girl. Sky, who is named after a little town in Missouri. And my nieces, KJ, Trinity, Haley, Izzy. Remember, when things seem to be at their worst, look to those closest to you. Your moms, your dads, your neighbors, your fathers, your aunts, your uncles. Because that was proved that fateful morning 16 years ago. At any given moment, when things look the darkest, we as Americans show the fortitude, the strength, and the heart to stand together to help those who are in need and to comfort those that need it. I thank you all for this opportunity, and God bless you.
Sergeant Curtis, thank you for the inspirational story. When I told you to just tell your story, I knew it was going to be good. I told you all it was going to be good. It makes me proud to be an American. Thank you, sir. We're going to conclude today's ceremony with a very powerful battle hymn of the Republic. But before we do that, I want to encourage all of you, if you have not seen it yet, to visit the corner of Eureka and Yorba Linda Boulevard, where the Young America's Foundation has set a remarkable display of 2,977 flags for the victims of 9/11. This group of young men and women make me proud as a patriot, knowing that the youth of America is continuing to ensure that we never forget. Please take a second, go take a look at it. It's pretty powerful. With that, Mike, Chuck, take it away. Thank you for coming. That concludes our ceremony. God bless.